You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Hello, and thanks for joining Revolution 250. This is where we remember events that took place 250 years ago this week. It's a short bonus episode from the American Revolution podcast to remember these important anniversaries from the Revolutionary War. This week, we remember the British effort to end the war peacefully before launching its full-scale invasion. These negotiations took place in early August 1776. By early August 1776, the British had amassed an awe-inspiring force in New York Harbor. It was meant to intimidate the colonists into backing down voluntarily and submitting to British rule. General William Howe commanded an army of over 32,000 regulars and Hessians, and his older brother, Admiral Richard Howe, also known as Lord Howe, commanded the Royal Navy with 400 ships of war and over 10,000 sailors and Marines. The Howe brothers had had an older brother, George Howe, who had been killed in the French and Indian War near Fort Ticonderoga. The New England militia who were under Howe's command greatly admired him, and after the war they paid for a memorial that was placed in Westminster Abbey. The younger Howe brothers appreciated this tribute and felt a special affinity with the colonists. They were also both Whigs who supported many of the principles for which the colonists were fighting. As members of Parliament, they voted against British efforts to infringe on the rights of colonists. William Howe even went so far as to tell his constituents that he would never fight against the colonists in America. He obviously got over that promise, but the Howe brothers certainly felt conflicted about unleashing war on their colonial brothers. In July, William Howe had tried to begin a dialogue with George Washington. The Continental commander, however, refused even to receive Howe's letters. Washington had made clear to all of his officers that they were not to correspond with the enemy, even if they had old friends on the other side. Washington made no exception for himself. He also believed he had no authority to discuss peace terms. That was up to Congress. Washington was there to fight a war, not act as a diplomat. General and Admiral Howe saw their roles differently. Admiral Howe refused to accept command of the naval fleet sent to America unless he was also given an appointment as a peace commissioner. The rest of the peace commission consisted of his brother, General William Howe. The Howe brothers hoped that the colonists would see their military might that was set against them and accept the reality of the situation before they had to spill blood. Admiral Howe, when he arrived, sent letters directly to members of the Continental Congress, including his old friend Benjamin Franklin. Howe and Franklin had enjoyed many conversations in London before the war, when Franklin was a colonial agent for several colonies. Franklin also spent considerable time with the Howe brothers' sister, Caroline Howe, while he was living in England. Howe sent the letters ashore under a flag of truce, and a courier carried them to Philadelphia. Howe's letter to Franklin arrived at Congress while he was out doing other things. When he returned to the State House, someone handed him the letters, and he took them still sealed and handed them directly to the President of Congress, John Hancock. Franklin asked that they be read aloud to the entire Congress before he even had a chance to read them himself. Franklin did not want the slightest hint that he was privately corresponding with the enemy. Doing so was a matter of great suspicion and raised questions of one's loyalty to the cause. The letters made clear that Howe had no authority to make any political compromises regarding issues that had led to the war. His only authority as the peace commissioner was to grant pardons. Franklin received permission from Congress to respond to the letters, and he had the original letters to him and his reply published in a newspaper to make clear that there was no secret correspondence and everyone could be privy to the conversation that was happening between these men. Franklin's reply essentially said that Howe admitted that he only had authority to grant pardons. Franklin pointed out that Americans were the victims of the abuse and that a victim shouldn't have to seek pardon from his abuser. In Franklin's words, quote, "Directing pardons to be offered the colonies who are the very parties injured expresses indeed that opinion of our ignorance, baseness, and insensibility which your uninformed and proud nation has long been pleased to entertain of us, but it can have no other effect than that of increasing our resentment." Franklin went on to say that the United States were now independent of Great Britain. Howe claimed to offer peace, but the only peace they would accept would be an end to the war between these two independent nations. Franklin was quite confident that Howe had no authority to agree to such terms. There had already been so much violence that there was no chance that the countries could return to the relationship that they had once had. Franklin said that he appreciated that Howe had hoped to end this conflict without violence, but that the United States would never agree to any terms that Britain was willing to find acceptable. Franklin concluded his letter by calling on Howe to resign his commission and go home. As Franklin put it, quote, "I know your great motive in coming hither was the hope of being instrumental in a reconciliation, and I believe when you find that impossible on any terms given you to propose, you will relinquish so odious a command and return to a more honorable private station." When Howe received Franklin's reply, he realized that a peaceful settlement was out of the question. Some blood would have to be spilled before these colonists came to their senses. The only question for Howe was how long and bloody the conflict would have to be. With that, the discussions of peace ended, and the British prepared for their invasion of New York. I hope you've enjoyed this Revolution 250 moment. For more context on this story, please check out episode 101 of the American Revolution podcast at blog.amrevpodcast.com. And please subscribe for free to the whole podcast on whatever platform you like. Thanks again for listening to this Revolution 250 moment on the American Revolution podcast.